Good evening, everybody. Keith Engel here for TGI Sports Talks College Football Huddle. How's everybody doing tonight? I see myself pixelating a little bit. Hopefully that will go away. I do not understand Spectrum's issues, but we'll go on from there. Welcome, everybody watching us tonight on, of course, TGI Sports Talk, watching us on Northeast Streaming Sports, Let's Talk Sports, and, of course, having a brain fade here, Zodiac. Yeah, so you can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of those. Listen, we're going to get into a lot of stuff college football related tonight. We'll have Jim Beringer from Let's Talk Sports join us at about 8 o'clock. So we'll get into a lot of stuff before then. But I have to start off tonight with a somber note. Somebody that has become a very close compadre here in the last 3.5 years that I've been doing this. We've collaborated on a lot of shows, shared a lot of my content to his network, and worked with a lot of his guys that will kind of be taking over the show on Let's Talk Sports. But I'm, of course, talking about Dan Harris, who over in the UK has done lots of work. This is a man who has overcome a lot and did a lot in the podcasting world, helped a lot of people get started. Our own Alan Perales, who started out on this show as one of my top followers. Dan helped him get set up and start his own show on Let's Talk Sports. So Dan has decided to step away from Let's Talk Sports, turning it over, as I said, to some of his top lieutenants over there, which I assume is Tanner, Nick Bodkins, and we wish them luck and we'll continue to work with them. But we want to give Dan our thanks for the time that we've had to spend with him. And, you know, he is sadly coming to the end of a road, not the road, a road, at least in the grand scheme of things. And I've, pledged to keep Dan's name here. He wants to make sure, like all of us, we want to be remembered. And I guarantee you that Dan Harris will stay remembered on Let's Talk Sports. I've enjoyed collaborating with him over the years. His knowledge of sports here in the States is amazing. His own story is amazing to me. And the fact that it's going to reach a sad conclusion is not fun for us, but I want to applaud him all at the same time and let him know that his friendship and working with him has meant a lot to me over these last 3.5 years, and I will stay with him until the end, and I will keep his name alive here on TGI Sports Talk for as long as I am doing this. So anyway, keep Dan in your thoughts and prayers, and miracles happen, but we have to be realistic as well, and I know he is, and him stepping away is just, the next step, and we wish Dan the best, and our prayers stay with him. So again, please keep him in your thoughts and prayers as well. Anyway, to kind of get on to the business of the night, as I said, we're going to get into a lot of stuff. We'll talk about last week's takeaways, some scares for FSU, Georgia a little bit. I think Georgia's scare might be a little bit overrated. Looking closer at it, Alabama, the quarterback situation there is still pretty ugly. Colorado escapes in overtime. And then we'll look ahead to this week's games. Big games this week. 6 matchups of ranked teams, 7 if you want to count Clemson, who probably should still be ranked at least in the top 25. I'm not sure how our video looks tonight, but I got a bad feeling. I will also get into some other stories. Michigan State's Mel Tucker. Michigan State looking to get out, not surprisingly, from under the $79 million they still owe Mel Tucker by firing him for cause. So we'll see. We'll talk a little bit about that. We got all these big matchups to talk about this week too. We talk about Is Alabama done? I don't think so. There's some crazy Kenny Gifford, if he should join us tonight. I mean, he brought up to me in the chat today about, and I think it might have been Paul Feinbaum who talked about the fact that maybe Nick Saban is on a hot seat. Look, Nick Saban's on no hot seat. If Alabama's on a hot seat, but Nick Saban's not going anywhere. No, until he wants to, Nick Saban's not going anywhere. End of story. Let's forget about that nonsense. I mean, it is nonsense. It really is. Trying to do what I can to make sure that we get our feed back to where we want it to be. Anybody wants to comment on that, please do so. So we'll get into all that. Look at the top 25. As I said, we'll have Jim Behringer on at 8 o'clock-ish to talk more college football. Talk about this week's games and some of the stories that we'll talk about in the meantime. And I'll be on at 8:30 if you want to switch over to Sports Scope. I'll be on with Robert Butler for 30 minutes or so to talk some more college football. And he's got a Mac Jones question for me, apparently. So we got with us. Good evening, Rick. Good to have you with us today. Or tonight, I should say. So, and you're Jordan. Listen, I'm going to start with this. So last week's games, right? What do we take away from what we saw last week? South Carolina and Georgia. Again, we talked about South Carolina maybe one of the stumbling blocks that Georgia might run into, even though they had this game at home. They've got a pretty soft schedule. SEC is down. I know John DeLong will probably be in here. Thank you, Rick, for that. As I watch myself, it sometimes look like I'm off. So and maybe I got to stop worrying about it so preoccupied with it. John DeLong will probably be in here to tell me I'm crazy, but the SEC is not the SEC right now. And the Pac-12 is not the Pac-12. The SEC looks to be wide open. I think Georgia's still a front runner. But LSU, if they run the table, their bad loss to FSU will be forgotten. Georgia, last week's game against South Carolina, when you look at it face value, yes, they were behind 14-3 at the half. But they pretty quickly, I thought in the second half of this game, took control of this game. And I didn't feel like South Carolina was going to have a chance to win this game, from the middle of third quarter on, maybe early in the second half on. I mean, do we look at this differently if he doesn't, Kirby Smart does what he normally does or often does. He stopped throwing the football. And they kneeled on their last possession. If they score a touchdown late in this game and they win 31-14, we probably look at this a little bit differently. So again, I'm not going to overreact to Georgia struggling. I am going to overreact to Alabama struggling with South Florida. I mean, a team that won, I want to say South Florida won one game last year, maybe two. Their quarterbacks were atrocious. He benched Milroe for some reason. So Alabama's got an uphill struggle this year, but that does not mean Nick Saban's on a hot seat. Please stop. Paul Feinbaum might have been the one who set this off today. I don't know if that's where Kenny's remarks came from or not. Maybe it was. I tried to turn them on during the day here and there, and I didn't get the opportunity today. Nick Saban, but that doesn't mean Nick Saban may not step away. He's a young 71 years old. So let's not read too much into that. I'm not even reading too much into Florida State struggling with Boston College. Boston College is not very good. Their coach, Jeff Haley's on the hot seat there. The quarterback for BC had a pretty good game throwing and running the ball. He ran the ball for nearly 100 yards, threw for over 300. Threw and ran for a touchdown. These games happen. You got to win these games and escape those games. This is the big test for Florida State coming up this week at Clemson. I know Clemson's down. They're out of the top 25. They probably should be in it. But this is the big matchup for SFU for right now. And probably until they see him again, assuming both teams get to the championship game, which they may not. Duke's got a game in hand against Clemson. You could be seeing Florida State and Duke in that ACC championship game. So again, I don't know that I'd really overreact too much. Now, again, Ohio State, I know it was Western Michigan or Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky has a pretty good offense, and that Ohio State defense held them to 10 yards. 10 yards. That would be a story. 10 points. And McCord got better. And again, this is 3 weeks in a row. McCord looked better. So you look at, we talked about before the season, which quarterback situation were we concerned about the most, Alabama or Ohio State? And I said Alabama for multiple reasons, mostly because the wide receiver core is also a question, and it's not a question at Ohio State. Now, because of one, listen, we've gone from Tua, Mac Jones to Bryce Young. So now we have a year without a good quarterback, and all of a sudden Nick Saban can't coach anymore. Stop. Everybody's going to have a bit of a down year or two. Well, it's 2 games last year, and people are all over him. He's not getting fired, so stop with the nonsense there, number one. What other takeaways? Washington very quietly has now not just won 3 in a row. They've blown 3 people out of the building, including Michigan State, who's in disarray. We know that. On the road. Don't take Washington lightly. We talked about Alabama struggling 17-9, man, or 17-3 on the road at South Florida, one of the worst teams in FBS last year. FBS 1A last year. Florida with a big win. A lot of people, including myself, had Florida winning 3-4 games tops this year. They beat the number 11 team in the country last week. Billy Napier needed this win in the worst way. Utah rolls. Big game with Utah and UCLA this weekend. We'll get into that. There's some really big games this weekend. What was the other? Ole Miss rolling over Georgia Tech. I get it. Georgia Tech's not great. Better than they were under Jeff Collins. Coming back. Big matchup with Mississippi and Alabama this week, especially considering the way both these teams are playing, kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum right now. We got the whole Deion thing, 3-0. And the Deion hype. Listen, I'm on both sides of this. There are people who think Deion's a clown, and this is just a circus. And it'll end. Well, look at Deion's a good football coach. Deion's 3-0, but they haven't really played anybody. They were 2 touchdown, maybe more than a 2 touchdown favorite in this game, and they needed to escape in overtime to win. But Deion's a good coach. Will he be exposed? Listen, we'll find out. His first real test comes at Oregon. Game days are going to be there. I'm going to tell you that Oregon's going to beat this team. The question is going to be, are they totally, exposed as I don't want to say a fraud, but if you said before the season they'd be 3-0, most prognosticators had them 1-4 at this point. Got a little noise going here. Let me get rid of that. Now, even if they get exposed this week against Oregon, or next week, or both this week and next week against USC, that doesn't mean Deion's a bad coach or a clown. Listen, take away the sunglasses, take away the bravado. That's just to drive the hype train. This guy can coach football. Nick Saban praises him. I read an article about somebody else who wrote a really, really glowing article about Deion and his abilities as a coach. I've talked with a bunch of people who do not believe that Deion is, what's the word I want to use? That Deion's real. I think what you see is what you get. There's 2 guys. He says it all the time. There's Prime and there's Deion. He could coach. He holds kids accountable. He's turned around a program that's been dormant for decades. They're sold out every home game for the entire year for the first time in their history. This team won a national championship in the 90s. Didn't sell out every game. Does that mean they're national championship contenders? Absolutely not. As I said, and I've been saying all along, they will probably close September 3-2. If this team goes 6-6 or 7-5, it's a tremendous turnaround by Coach Prime or Dion, whoever's with us that day. Oklahoma's another team. Watch out. We're going to take a look at the rankings, and I want to see are the final four teams, are they ranked in the top 10 right now or not? I don't think they are. Oklahoma hasn't been tested yet. They win big last week. Duke rolls at home. Listen, watch out for Duke. Duke could be a sleeper. Pac-12 could be a sleeper for two teams. I keep saying they'll beat each other up. I mean, they had the most ranked teams. What do they got? 6 ranked teams? We'll take a look at it in a second. Now, we expect them to beat each other up, but if USC and Washington get to the final, one's a one-loss team, one's a undefeated team, and they have a really thriller, and they end up with one loss each, and things continue to play out the way they are now. Now, again, we have to know how all the rest of it plays out to say, yes, Pac-12 could have two teams. They could, though. One Big Ten team and one SEC team is very, very probable this year. I don't say likely. Possible. I said probable. Possible. Washington State continues to win big. They got a big game against Oregon State. We talked about the way that league will beat each other up. And Iowa scores 41 points. Get that average up over 25. Coach Kurt France's son, the offensive coordinator, is now averaging over 25 points a game. As we said, he's got to do that to keep his job, average over 25 points a game. What else from last week that I want to chat about real quick? We talked about Dion. We talked about the quarterback problems at Alabama. It just I don't know how they're going to fix it. Milroe's probably their best bet. Buckner can't play. The other kid showed some promise. Simpson, I think his name is, showed some promise, but they sacked him 5 times. So there's more problems on this team than just quarterback. It's the offensive line. It's wide receivers. It's not your typical Alabama team, but the sky's not necessarily falling forever. It does show you that when Nick Saban goes, though, there could be some downtime for Alabama then. And the Pac-12, to me, this is the big takeaway after 3 weeks for me. And we'll look at some of the other takeaways here in a minute, too. But one of the big takeaways is the SEC not as dominant. Sorry, John DeLong, wherever you are. And the Pac-12 possibly with a season to remember as it exits stage left. Stage right, whatever. I don't know. Where does that leave us with the coaches poll? No, not coaches poll, the AP poll. Georgia stays number 1. Michigan stays number 2. Texas moves up 1 past Florida State. They switch places at 3 and 4. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Ohio State, Penn State, Washington, Notre Dame all stay at the same place, 5 through 9. I have no arguments there. Notre Dame will move up quickly if they beat Ohio State. And after that, they've got Duke at Duke, by the way, which is going to be an interesting game. They have, can't remember the game they have in between. Then they have USC. If Notre Dame gets to USC undefeated and beats them, you're going to see they'll jump people. They could be number one in the polls. There'll be nobody with better victories. We got to get there. I get it. It's all, assumption right now. Oregon moves up 3 spots to number 9 or number 10. Utah up 1 to 11. LSU up 2 to 12. They've climbed back up nicely after that bad loss to FSU. Alabama drops out of the top 10 for the first time in, I believe, 150 plus weeks. They were chasing down the Miami record and fall of double digits, like 14 or 16 weeks short of it. This goes back to like 2019. Oregon State moves up to 14, up 2 spots. Ole Miss up 2 to 15. Ole Miss playing really good football. Dart playing much more efficient and productive a quarterback for this team. Oklahoma up 3 very impressive wins against 3 very unimpressive opponents. So I'm interested to see. I picked Oklahoma to make the college football playoff. I'm very interested to see what they do once they hit league play. Carolina up 3 to 17 after a win this past week. They're 3-0, playing some better defense. Duke up 3 to 18 with an impressive win at home. Colorado drops a spot after going to overtime to beat Colorado State as a big favorite. Miami gets up 2 spots. They're still undefeated. Washington State up 2. UCLA up 2. Tennessee, the big drop of the week. Tennessee down 12 spots, just barely staying in the top 25 after losing badly to Florida. A bad Florida team, what we predicted to be a bad Florida team. It remains to be seen how bad this loss is. It'll depend on what Florida does the rest of the way out, in my mind. Iowa goes to 3-0 and moves up back into the top 25. I think they moved in last week, so they move up 1 spot. Florida, not ranked, moves into the top 25, falling out. Kansas State with a bad loss to Missouri. I predicted on this show Missouri would beat Kansas State, be one of the big upsets of the week, and don't you know I don't get the bet in. I get off the golf course late, didn't know what time it was, and never got my bet in. 1 for 1 only in college last week. Who else is close? Clemson probably ought to be in the top 25. I do believe Clemson belongs in over Florida. Probably belongs in over Tennessee at this point. Maybe even Iowa. But they're just on the outside, so we can say basically we got 7 top 25 matchups this week. Now, looking at that, are the final 4 teams, let's just say the top 9, because Oregon just moved into the top 10 this week. So let's just take the top 9. We got Georgia, Michigan, Texas, Florida State, USC, Ohio State, Penn State, Washington, and Notre Dame. Is the final 4 set amongst those 9 teams? I'm going to say no. Because you got teams on a fly from the outside. You got Oregon playing very well, 3-0, could easily come out of the Pac-12. You got Utah 3-0 right behind them. LSU rebounding nicely. Somebody's got to win that SEC. And if it's not Georgia, it's likely going to be LSU, unless Mississippi State surprises us and they're as good as we think, or they look. Alabama, we can probably discount. I'm not sure. Oklahoma, we talked about. Duke. Listen, if Duke somehow runs the table and wins the ACC, I'm not counting on it. I had them at 9 wins without beating Clemson, by the way. So let's move it to 10. Don't count out a Duke run at 16. I mean, or a Miami. There are some teams way down that still have a chance to jump way up. Now, realistically, teams that aren't in that top 9 that I would say have a shot, Oregon, Utah, I guess Alabama, just because of their track record, Oklahoma, And I'm going to say Duke. Those are the teams with a realistic shot. Or whoever. It could be Miami, too, could be a surprise in that ACC. If it's not Florida State or Clemson, it's going to be one of those other two teams. If there's an ACC representative. But all of this, what do you want to, not a calamities, but lack of cohesiveness or lack of fluidity in some of the big Power 5 conferences, like the SEC, they're going to get a bid. They're unlikely to get two. The Big Ten, still maybe on the outside, a shot of getting two teams in. ACC could go without a team. Possibly the Big 12 could go without a team. Texas, though, is looking very good. But if they lose a game and the Big 12 is not very good, and the Pac-12 is so strong, if they don't cannibalize each other, they could possibly get two teams in there. Rick's got an off-topic comment here. Rams trade Cam Akers to the Vikings for a bag of chips and Diet Pepsi. Good luck with him, Rick, because he'll play about 6 downs and get hurt. We won't spend a lot of time on that, but I think you're going to see some trades in the NFL before the trade deadline. Be very interesting trade deadline here in the NFL. We don't have that in college football, not yet. The transfer portal likely will be opened up to players in season before long. Who the hell knows? Anything's possible with these people. Good grief. As I said, we'll be joined by Jim Behringer at the top of the hour. We'll talk some of these same topics and your topics. Don't be afraid to throw something out if there's something you do want to take a look at. I don't know. What other things have happened here in the first 3 weeks that we should probably chat about? Very little's changed in the first part of the top 10, right? Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, still at the top of the rankings. We've had some big shakeups, though, just below them with Florida State and Texas moving up into those spots, even ahead of USC and Penn State, let's say. Penn State's probably got a good reason to be excited. They've got a big game this weekend too, don't they? They've got Iowa. Maybe that's a big game. It's at Happy Valley, so we'll see. And USC's off to a pretty good start. And I think their defense is a little bit better. I don't think it's great, but they won by, 178-52. They've only given up 52 points in 3 games, so that's not terrible. Let's see what happens when they play a good team. But they're probably happy. You got some teams probably on the verge of panicking, like Alabama. Again, Alabama being in trouble does not equal Nick Saban being in trouble. He's only the greatest college football coach of all time, guys. Give him a break here. You're going to have a bad game here. They've won 10 games for 15 consecutive seasons. That could be in danger. We'll see. 15 straight AP top 10 finishes, 14 straight. I don't know what that is. I'll forget that number. 6 national titles, 3 other title game appearances. And there's like a 1% chance right now that Nick Saban could go under 500. It's not going to happen. But they could very easily have an 8-4 season, maybe. So panic is close in Alabama. Panic's close in Clemson. The Corey Klubick era has not started with great success. I mean, they lost badly, as we know, to Duke. And they've rebounded, beating Charleston Southern and FAU by a combined, 80 points. LSU, with that big loss to Florida State. But here's the thing for LSU. They might very well be the best team in the SEC. We'll find out as we go through the season. I still think it's Georgia, but there's not as many contenders as we probably thought. And I do think the league is down. But if they run the table in the SEC and win the SEC title, well, the FSU game is pretty much irrelevant. They'll be in the playoff. Tennessee, bad loss to their arch rival, Florida. They always struggle with Florida. And this is a bad loss. Great starts and a new lease on life for some schools, too, like Texas. We've been waiting forever. Texas is back. Texas is back. Well, Texas is back. They went to Tuscaloosa and won. I know Alabama's down, but that's still a good win. I don't care what year it is. It's a good win. Florida State, who I was very high on before the season. I did pick them to get into the college football playoff. They should be very happy with a great start, despite the struggles in Boston College, at Boston College last week. Not an easy place to play. I've gone to a lot of football games there. It is a very great football venue, and it can be a raucous place when Boston College is playing well. And it's a tough place to play at times, and Florida State comes away with a win. That's all that matters at this point. That would have been a devastating loss, don't get me wrong, but the win is fine. Oklahoma, the other team I predicted. Remember, Georgia, Ohio State. It was funny. Florida State and Oklahoma. I might be more confident in Florida State and Oklahoma than I am in Georgia and Ohio State right now. I said Oklahoma or Texas would win the Big 12 on the way out. I still think it'll be Oklahoma. Going to be a big matchup with the Red River rivalry this year. Huge implications this year. Notre Dame. Off to an impressive 3-0 start. We find out a lot about Sam Hartman and Ohio State this week. Against Ohio State this week. Sam Hartman and Notre Dame against Ohio State this week. Sam Hartman, I mean, again, unfairly probably had a reputation for not winning big games at Wake Forest. Didn't beat Clemson, for instance. And those were the games that mattered at that point in time. But the problem is, this is not Wake Forest, and I don't mean to bash Wake Forest. Dave Claus has done a great job there, and we'll get Larry Sorensen on here probably next week to start taking a look a little bit more at the ACC and some of the things going on about that league. But this Notre Dame team is better than any team that Sam Hartman played on at Wake Forest. The defense is really good. And this team has national title aspirations, and Sam Hartman might be the guy. We'll find out. We thought it was going to be OSU and USC would be the litmus test for Notre Dame. Now they got Duke in the middle of those two games, and that also is going to be an interesting matchup. Ole Miss. Listen, it's a team that, again, they were 7-0 last year when things imploded, so let's not get too excited. But this is a team that's playing as good as anybody in the SEC right now. Nice win, a very good Tulane team, albeit without their quarterback. Tulane's quarterback was out. But Jason Dart is playing good quarterback, mostly mistake-free football for Ole Miss. They got a huge game against Alabama this week, and we're going to find out just how good they are this week. Again, no better time. I don't know. I guess you could look at it two ways. No better time to get Alabama or no worse time to get Alabama. We'll see how that works out come Saturday. We'll go through all of these matchups here in just a bit. Obviously, one of the great takeaways is how good the Pac-12 is. We thought it would be good. But you've got Washington, Oregon, Utah, Oregon State, Washington, all ranked. Utah, all ranked. Can the Pac-12 have a magical season just as it disintegrates. It would be ironic. Probably a couple of the biggest surprises. Colorado, obviously, 3-0, and most of the prognosticators had them 1-4 after this Oregon game that's coming up this weekend. I still think, again, they'll be 3-2 at the end of the month, but don't take anything away from the start. They're ranked 88 when the season started. 88. Higher in some polls, but 88. Texas State, too. They were ranked 122. They played very well. Beat a Baylor, good Baylor, well, not a good Baylor team, but they bought a Power 5 team in Baylor at home or on the road for them. Duke, tremendous start for Duke. They've got to be bursting at the seams at Duke. At the chances they have right now, they could not be set up better to win the ACC. Clemson's reeling a little bit. They've already beat them. They're going to have a big game against FSU at some point here. They got big games against Notre Dame. Duke really controls its own destiny in a lot of ways here to be able to do something they couldn't even dream of. And that's even contending for a spot in the college football playoff. Colorado's, talk about that. Rutgers 3-0. Don't get too excited. The Big Ten schedule's coming up. FIU's been a good surprise. What else? I mean, those are kind of the stories of the top first 3 weeks. Oh, including Mel Tucker. We'll touch on Mel Tucker here real quick, and we'll probably talk about it with Jim Behringer at the top of the hour too. I want to get into some of the takeaways he has for the first 3 weeks, and also we'll look at some of these big games this week. Mel Tucker suspended, more or less fired. I mean, it depends on who you talk to. And they've made notice that they're firing him for cause, moral turpitude, if you will, probably will be the thing. And Mel Tucker has shot back, and his people have shot back and made it clear this thing will be going to litigation. This is the only way these universities can get out from under these big contracts that they sign these coaches to. There were a lot of rumors last year in Texas A&M, at Texas A&M, College Station, that they were looking for some way to get out of that contract with Jimbo Fisher for cause. Well, Mel Tucker Gate stupidly has given Michigan State the perfect avenue to get out from under paying him the remaining $79 million on his contract. He'll fight it. He'll probably get settled somewhere, for tens of millions of dollars. But how stupid do you have to be? I mean, you take whether he's right or wrong, it's a he said, she said thing. But come on, Mel, you can't. He was separated from his wife, so from that standpoint, okay. But the woman that they bring in to talk to your kids about sexual harassment, about spousal abuse, that's the woman you want to take up with? Bad idea, Mel. Now, this is going to be interesting, too. If they can get out from under this, you may see other schools, again, keeping this type of thing. And again, first of all, I think you're going to see a trend away from these contracts, given the fiascos with Jimbo Fisher and Mel Tucker under different circumstances. Well, similar and different at the same time. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I'm going to wait for Jim. We'll get into the games. I'm going to get into the games outside of the top 25. How about we do that? And when Jim gets here, we'll go through the top 20, especially these ranked matchups. We'll do that with Jim Behringer. And we'll look at some other stuff too within college football. Actually, before I go on, let me look at this because I did have a couple things. There was a couple questions in the mailbag that I think, again, I talked a little bit about, Coach, is Deion just a flash in the pan, or can he really coach? I think he's a good coach. You have to he's different than anybody else. That's why people think it's a circus. I thought it'd be a circus, and I thought it was a joke when he got hired by Jackson State. But he showed there he could coach. He showed he holds kids accountable. He shows he knows how to motivate teams. I don't know how he is with X's and O's, but a lot of head coaches aren't the best strategists in the world. They motivate and they recruit, and that's what Deion's done. Travis Hunter's a perfect example, and I hope he's okay because he's a great player. He's a perfect example. He was all set to go to Florida State until Deion got hired at Jackson State, and at the end of the day, he said he would coach. He would have followed Coach Sanders if he coached in Alaska. So yes, Deion is a really, really good coach. We kind of talked about that topic. There's a couple other questions I thought were pretty good here. If you could redo your SEC picks, who would you have winning the conference? I'm not changing. I'll stick with Georgia. And I'm going to pick, as far as I'm going to pick Georgia against LSU again. And Georgia wins. I'm sticking with Georgia winning the national championship. Until they lose, they're still the best team in the country, in my mind. But watch out for Notre Dame. That was one of the questions. If Notre Dame beats Ohio State and Southern Cal, should it be ranked number one? I think Georgia's got to lose, but remember, the Irish also have games with Duke and Louisville in between those two games. But I will tell you, if they win all four of those games, you're going to have a hard time selling me that Notre Dame isn't the best team in the country, having played the best schedule in the country, if that comes to fruition. I mean, their schedule's looking better and better every day. We talked about Washington and USC both finishing with one loss, and they play a great, great Pac-12 team. Could they both be in the conference championship? I think that's possible. I might talk about that with Jim Beringer as well. Make a note so I remember to go back there. This is a funny question. From lists of Power 5 teams that are 3-0, which is most likely to make the playoff? Duke, Rutgers, UCF, or Missouri? Listen, I said Missouri would be much better, and I said they beat Kansas State. That doesn't mean they're a college football contender. Of these teams, as funny as it may be to hear, Duke has the best chance, and Duke has a realistic path to the playoff. I don't care about that. Is it possible that Notre Dame is not deserving of the praise and substantial bouquets thrown its way? Which team has it defeated? Notre Dame haters. That's why college football is better with Notre Dame being good, because they're a very polarizing topic of conversation. Always. There's always going to be detractors, and there's always going to be protractors. No, that's not right. That's my Perth education again. Let's see. Let me look at this week's schedule here. I want to get away from some of the main games. I'm going to talk about the ranked matchups with Jim Beringer, but let's look at some of the other games in the top 25 and maybe around the country. Miami will go to Temple. Miami playing really, really good football. Van Dyke, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception in 3 games, playing great football. What was expected out of him last year. Be careful. Miami's 23.5 on the road here. Be very careful. Trap game. I think Miami will win, but I don't know if they'll win by that much. We'll skip that one for a minute. Rutgers will go to Michigan. Rutgers bubble will be burst big time. Jim Harbaugh back. Michigan is just loaded. McCarthy's playing some really good football. Corum back and healthy. Michigan should win this game easily, and Rutgers bubble will be burst. We'll talk about Florida State and Clemson with Jim. Oklahoma at Cincinnati. Oklahoma only 14.5. Cincinnati a bit down. Nice win at Pittsburgh, but Scott Satterfield, the new head coach, coming into the Big 12. I think this is a game that Oklahoma really wants to win big, and I like the over in this game. This could be a wager for Keith on Saturday. We'll see. By the way, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a wager on Notre Dame getting 3 points at home against Ohio State too, by the way, in case I forget to say that when I talk about it with Jim. Some other games outside of the ranked matchups. Duke goes to UConn. UConn, one of the great stories last year. Jim Mora did a great job turning that program around, getting them to a bowl game. 0-3 this year. Things are not going to get any easier this week. Duke is going to roll over UConn. And they may win and cover 21.5 points. Texas San Antonio, one of my sleeper picks this year, not turning out so far. That's funny. I hit the button inadvertently in the perfect timing. They're going to Tennessee at a bad time. Tennessee looking to bounce back big after a bad loss. Arkansas at LSU. Arkansas has taken a step back from where they've been the last couple of years with Coach Sam Pittman doing a great job at Arkansas, but they're struggling a bit this year. They're 2-1. I think they're going to get their clocks cleaned in LSU this week. That one we'll talk about with Jim. UAB goes to Georgia. UAB 1-2 under their new coach, Trent Dilfer. Again, by the way, going back to Deion, Deion's famous, right? But Deion could also coach. We found out he could coach at Jackson State. So Deion getting hired by Colorado he's getting hired as a real football coach. He's not getting hired as a, publicity move like Trent Dilfer being hired at UAB in my mind. No experience, no anything. Or Eddie George at Middle Tennessee. So anyway, I think UAB will go to Georgia and probably get their clocks cleaned. It's a 42-point spread, though, and Kirby Smart has not shown a proclivity to blow teams out here recently. Texas goes to Baylor. Texas will be 15 on the road. This is a place to be careful. Texas last week didn't cover. I said to watch out for them having a little bit of a lull after that high of beating Alabama on the road. They did win the game at the end of the day fairly handily, but it was tied going into the fourth quarter. Ohio State goes to Penn State. First real test for Penn State. Notre Dame. Iowa is 3-0. Their defense playing really well. McNamara is a real quarterback for a change for Iowa. He can throw the football, but their offense still, despite the 41 points last week, is still a bit prehistoric, if you will. Big game for Penn State, though. I think Penn State needs to have a showing here to justify that 7 ranking, and before they get heading into the meat of their Big Ten schedule. Carolina will go to Pittsburgh. Be careful, 7.5 on the road. Bad spot for Carolina bettors here. Be careful. USC will get started in league play. They'll be a 34-point favorite at Arizona State, who is just atrocious. And Cal will go to Washington and be their latest bludgeoning victim, if you will. Let's look around the league at some of the other games outside of the top 25 that may be of interest. Again, we'll be joined here in another 10 or 11 minutes, probably by Jim Beringer from Let's Talk Sports. And speaking of Let's Talk Sports, I said at the top of the show, please keep a thought and a prayer in your head for my good friend Dan Harris. You can read about his situation and his departure from Let's Talk Sports on my page, my personal page, on the TGI Sports Talk page, and it's a very sad situation for a very good man, and we're going to keep our we're going to keep praying for a miracle, but we understand, life is not fair sometimes, and he'll stay alive on this show forever. I will tell you that right now. What else we got? We got Wisconsin at Purdue as league play really ramps up everywhere. These are Friday night games. Wisconsin at Purdue, North Carolina State at Virginia, Boise State and San Diego State, an important game in the Mountain West. Both teams off to uneven starts. Air Force at San Jose State. The Mountain West plays a lot of Friday night games and Thursday night games, I think, too. We talked about that game. Let's get into Army. We'll go to Syracuse. Syracuse off to a 3-0 start. We'll see if they can keep that going. Our Army off to a 2-1 start, a pretty impressive win last week. They've gone to a new offense this year, as we talked about, a bit of a new offense, throwing the football a lot more. I mean, their quarterback's already thrown for 4 touchdowns, and that's usually a year's output for an Army quarterback. So great job by them. This ought to be an interesting game. 2-1 Army against 3-0 Syracuse. Auburn at Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher needs to start winning games and winning them convincingly. Auburn 3-0, but this could be a reality check for Hugh Freeze here. Other interesting games, no interest for me there. SMU and TCU. TCU, the better TCU plays from here on out, the better that win for Colorado will look. And if they fall on their faces, as I kind of feel they may, that will make that win look much less impressive, obviously. We'll talk about that with Mr. Jim Beringer. We'll talk about that. We already did talk about that. Maryland goes to Michigan State. Listen, probably a good spot to bet Maryland as well. Michigan State in spiral mode right now. Nebraska should get their second win in a row, probably with Louisiana Tech. BC will play Louisville. I won't be betting any of these games, by the way. I talked about that. Oklahoma State, bad loss for them last week. They go to Iowa State trying to right the ship. 2-1 Oklahoma State at 1-2 Iowa State. And Matt Campbell, I mean, his star has fallen. This is a guy who probably could have had his pick of jobs here a few years ago. And, things may not end well for him at Iowa State, unfortunately. What other matchups we have here that we like? Georgia Tech will go to Wake Forest, 3-0 Wake Forest. Still playing really good football under Dave Clawson with Sam Hartman gone and some other of those weapons gone. We'll see whether they can make themselves a factor in the ACC as they start league play. Next week, we'll start looking around the leagues at the standings and whatnot. We talked about that game. Arizona will play at Stanford. Stanford's off to just a really rough start. They do have one win. No wins in FBS 1A and just got destroyed by USC the last time out. Appalachian State against Wyoming, which on the face of it may not seem like an exciting game. I think this will be a fun game to watch. And it's one that I will probably take a look at some point Saturday night. I talked about that game. Don't care. Missouri gets Memphis, 2 3-0 teams. Very interesting game. SEC against an AAC team. So we'll see how that. Missouri, listen, they go to 4-0. Who knows? Again, there is the possibility of a really big sleeper coming out of that SEC this year. And it's going to be interesting. If that happens, you got a 2-loss SEC team. Let's say it's something crazy. It's Mississippi or Missouri or even LSU, 2 losses. Are they getting into the college football playoff? Could the SEC be left out altogether? We've talked about the possibility of not getting 2 teams, which they didn't last year. That always feels like an upset. Possibly. I'm on record as picking Georgia, but possibilities are there for an exciting college football season this year. the last year of the 14 playoff. Mississippi State and South Carolina, both off bad losses last week, will match up in the SEC. UCF and Kansas State will match up, and I think it's UCF's first Big 12 matchup. Who else? Talked about that. I mean, those are the games of some interest outside of the top 25. What else did I want to get into tonight? Let me look at some of the stories here that we didn't chat about. Oh, let's see. News-wise. Oh, sad story in LSU is as their safety, Greg Brooks has undergone surgery to remove a brain tumor. My thoughts and prayers are with him and his family, and hopefully he'll be okay. We talked about Nick Saban when great praise for Deion Sanders. If you ever watched the Deion Sanders interview on 60 Minutes, watch it. I found it riveting myself. Tragically, Dartmouth coach Buddy Stevens dies after he had a bad bike crash a bicycle crash. In March, he passed away at 66 years old. He was the winningest coach in Dartmouth history. Thoughts and prayers go out to him as well. Deion has gone out of his way to condemn the people who are with the death threats against CSU's Henry Blackburn. If you remember, Blackburn had a vicious tackle against Travis Henry, and Travis Henry, I believe, has a lacerated liver, if I'm not mistaken, that he needs to overcome if he's going to come back and continue what looked like a potential Heisman Trophy campaign. He's probably going to miss a little bit of time, and hopefully that is the case. Now, I will say, stop with the death threats. This kid made a bad mistake with a violent hit, but let's stop with the death threats. That doesn't make this situation any better. We talked about Mel Tucker, and this guy, I'm sorry. And again, I'm not taking sides here because I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I don't know where the evidence is. The evidence backs up what the woman accusing him has brought him up. The question is about whether it was consensual. But why put yourself in that situation? I don't understand guys who put themselves in these types of situations. I mean, all you got to do is watch the news. Don't do it. Anyway, what else have I got for news for you? Oh, we got a light turnout as far as comments tonight, guys. I don't know what happened. Our SEC elitists have abandoned us tonight, but that's okay. We will get great reception on the replays and the people who watch us on the rebound. But I do thank you that are here, and anybody who does come up with some comments, feel free to jump in. And we will have Jim Behringer joining us in just a few minutes as well. In the meantime, I didn't mention. I think I mentioned we talked about the Alabama quarterback situation. Nick Saban is going back to Milroe this week. I don't think he has any other choice. Milroe hasn't played badly. Turnovers have been an issue. But you watch Buckner play, he's just no good. Why they brought him down there from Notre Dame is beyond me. And I think the Simpson kid, I think, shows some promise, but I do not think he's ready for prime time just yet, if you will. Kirby Smart was talking about the horrible injury to Nick Chubb the other night in the Monday Night Football game. If you saw it, he does believe his former Georgia running back will bounce back from this injury. And it was a devastating injury, devastating to the Browns, devastating to Nick Chubb. And we do wish him well as well. What else we got here? Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The games I'm really interested. My top games here this weekend are obviously, and we're going to get into a Jim Behringer in just a second. Ohio State, Notre Dame, FSU at Clemson, Colorado at Oregon. These are the games we'll talk about with Jim. Ole Miss at Alabama, Oregon State at Washington State, Iowa at Penn State, and then UCLA at Utah. There's some great matchups here, guys. This is one of the best weeks I can remember in the middle of October for watching football. There's some good matchups outside the top 25 that we talked about as well. But these are the games that I think we're all going to be riveted to from noontime Saturday to pretty much, midnight. So it's going to be an exciting day of football. And it's going to cause a lot of ripple effect in the rankings. And, as we inch closer to those college football playoff rankings, which will come sooner than you think. They're a month away, maybe. Maybe not even that. But we're going to get much, much closer to it. A couple of programming notes as well. We'll be on Friday with the Are You Serious show. We will not have Are You Serious the next 2 Fridays, as I will be on vacation. I'm going to do a little bit of stuff Friday, but I will not be able to do the 8 o'clock Are You Serious? We'll have Let's Talk Sports. I've got Dan Harris on my mind, apparently. We'll have the Sunday Stream of Consciousness this Sunday, and then we'll get a show out the next couple of Sundays, but it's going to be probably not at our regular 8:30 time. We'll have to make time to do it while we're on the Caribbean. And same with this show. We'll be on next Wednesday, and then the following Wednesday will be a bit hit and miss. We'll do the best we can to bring you all of the news and all of my wonderful, wonderful thoughts about the world of college football. Oh, all right, Jim, where are you? I've led up to this. Where are you? Where are you, Rick? You haven't even commented once. I bashed the SEC as being down a bit, but still talked highly of your Georgia Bulldogs, and I've got nothing out of you tonight. Just kidding, buddy. Good to have you with us as always. Happy anniversary, by the way. I didn't wish you a happy anniversary on the air Sunday. I know this past weekend was your anniversary. I want to wish you and your bride, hope you had a great anniversary. What else? How about coaches? I wanted to look at, that's not what I wanted to look at. Coaches in trouble. Jimbo Fisher's got to, listen, they found a way to get out from under Mel Tucker's contract at Michigan State. The next big one to think about is Jimbo Fisher. And I'm not saying the same things are going on, so please don't get all over me for rumor mongering. They'll find a way. If Jimbo Fisher doesn't win this year, he's like, what is his record? Jimbo Fisher is like 30. Where's his record? I had it up here. He's 23-18 in the SEC since he went to Texas A&M. Really? For $10 million a year? 23-18? That's just crazy. That's crazy. Danny Gonzalez at New Mexico is probably also a guy squarely in the hot seat. Butch Jones, who wore out his welcome. He left Cincinnati, a very successful coach, following Kelly when he left Cincinnati. Butch Jones followed him, was very successful at Cincinnati, went to Tennessee and was not successful at all. Rehabilitated himself, as many coaches have in recent years on Alabama's staff. I wonder if that was Jim Behringer that texted me, by the way. Well, anyway, that was something else. Butch Jones has got himself in a lot of trouble at Arkansas State. He just could not get this team turned around, and I doubt he's going to survive this year. Who else? Jeff Haley, Hafley, we've talked about at Boston College for the last couple of years. He's now 16-22 overall, 9-18. After a promising start at BC, had some quarterback issues with Jerkovic getting hurt. He's got a pretty good dynamic quarterback right now, but still has not turned it into wins. He's going to be looked at very closely as well. Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, he just has not gotten it going there after taking over for Fuentes, who took over for very successful for decades, Frank Beamer. And Virginia Tech has really struggled, especially under Brent Pry. 4-10 overall, 1-6. I'm sorry, 1-6 in the ACC. Better get it turned around and get it turned around quickly. Ken Wilson at Nevada, not somebody we hear a lot about, but he's 2-13 overall. 0-8 in the Mountain West. Mountain West, I keep saying, very underrated conference. You're going to hear a lot more about the Mountain West and probably some teams from the ACC as the Oregon State and Washington State situations start to get clarified, whether they're going to bring teams in under the Pac-12 flag or whether that league just folds up and those two teams are forced to go to the Mountain West. You're going to hear a lot more about these teams, this conference going forward, one way or the other. I did miss something here. Rick Sherlock. Thank you for the anniversary thing I said. Georgia progresses as the year moves along. They always need to replace players and get them into positions. Yeah, I'll tell you, Rick, I said it at the top of the show, and I guess I'll bring it up again here for some who may not have heard it. There was a lot of just like the Alabama game, there was a lot of hand-wringing over the Georgia game being down 14-3 at halftime. But I watched the third quarter. I didn't see the first half. I watched the third quarter on, and, as Georgia had gotten ahead, 21-14 even, I just never felt like South Carolina was going to win this game. Georgia does get better as the season goes on. You're right. Their quarterback, I feel like I still feel like Kirby maybe doesn't trust Beck a lot. He did stop throwing the football in the fourth quarter, which is why this game was not a bigger win, if you will. I mean, the 24-14 final score makes it look like dominating is what Georgia was in the second half. I think they outgained them by nearly 200 yards in the second half. Without throwing the football in the whole fourth quarter, basically. He took the air out of the football, and he kneeled at a place where a lot of teams still would have been trying to score to make that 30. Because 31-14 looks a whole lot different than 24-14 in my mind and in voters' minds. And those games could matter down the road. So one of the overreactions, I think, from this week, and again, I will stand by my comments that I think overall, and Rick, I'd love to get your input on this. Overall, I think the SEC is just off a little bit this year. They're not quite the dominant conference that we've seen in the past. I think the Big Ten is likely to be ahead of them, and I think the Pac-12 is likely to be ahead of the SEC this year. And I think both of those conferences are more likely to send two teams to the conference, the college football playoff than the SEC. And it is within the realm of possibility, assuming my prognostication about Georgia's wrong. If that prognostication is wrong, there is a very good chance that nobody from the SEC goes. That's possible. And again, there's 100 different scenarios that could happen. But if you got a 2-loss SEC champion and an undefeated ACC champion and an undefeated and a 1-loss Pac-12 champion, and runner-up, or in the Big Ten, Oklahoma undefeated. Let's just say you get an undefeated Big 12 champion. You get an undefeated Pac-12 champion. You get an undefeated ACC champion, and you get an undefeated Big Ten champion, and you got a 1 or 2 loss SEC champion. I think the SEC is staying home for the first time in the history of the college football playoff. I think we're going to lose Mr. Jim Beringer tonight. I'm not sure. He's not joined us as of yet, and maybe something came up, which things tend to happen, and that's okay. Let me go back to my coaches in trouble, I guess. You know, Dave Aranda, who we all spoke very highly of his first year at Baylor, first couple of years at Baylor, got them to the Big 12 championship game just a couple of years ago, won that championship game, and probably kept Oklahoma State out of the college football playoff that year. Since then, they have not been very good. They're 4-8 in their last 12 games. If they lose to Texas Saturday, they'll be 1-3. And then they're at UCF. They've got Texas Tech, Cincinnati, Iowa State. This could be a bad season. This is not a 6-win team right now. And that could really come back to haunt Dave Aranda here before this is all said and done. What do you got? I can't get my comment here. Here we go. Manny will be transferring in early. You know what? It's very possible. Well, you again, in all fairness and complete transparency, Rick had been calling for Arch Manning that Georgia would be his pick. There's a couple possibilities here. Arch Manning could stay at Texas if Cam Ewers goes into the draft next year. One or both of them, not one or both of them could transfer out. Or he could be the starting quarterback there next year. Or he could be starting anywhere else in the SEC. He could be starting at Ole Miss next year. He could be starting at Georgia. He could be starting at Alabama. We don't know. It's all a crapshoot. And with that, we're going to bring in a few minutes later our own favorite Jim Beringer.
Hey, what's up?
Yep. Good to have you with us tonight. How are you?
Hey, sorry I'm a little late. Just talking some hockey. First day of training camps.
Listen, hockey, you're the hockey man. So if hockey talk keeps you away from college football, I totally understand because that's your day job after all.
By the way, check out Full Press Coverage. I have every week I will be doing my games of the week for college football. I've listed the 7 games that I think you should be watching this weekend.
Ah, cool. Well, we'll probably be talking about some of those games right now.
You probably already talked about some of those games already.
Well, I stayed away from what I wanted to get with you is a couple things, and we don't have quite as much time. I got to get on with Mr. Robert Butler at 8:30, but I wanted to talk about I held off talking about the ranked the games with 2 ranked teams this week. So
right.
We'll go through those and make our picks and have some comments. And
opening statement before we get going.
Yep.
To all the SEC elitists in this chat room and are watching, the Pac-12 in the last year of their existence as we know it is the best conference in college football right now. 8 teams in the top 25, 30-6 through the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm just saying.
You're backing up most of what I talked about the last 45 minutes because I've been talking up the Pac-12 and how ironic is they're going to have one of their best seasons in decades on their way out the door. And
imagine if the leadership could have just done something more for the TV.
Let me ask you this question real quick because I've been talking about possibilities. What's more likely to happen in your mind? The Pac-12 gets 2 invitees to the college football playoff, which is a possibility.
Could happen.
if they don't devour each other in conference play,
Right.
you get 2 one-loss teams and a great championship game, maybe. So is that more likely, or is it more likely that we don't have anybody from the SEC? Now I still have Georgia winning because I
still have Georgia. I still have Georgia getting there, but I don't think I'm gonna have 2 SEC teams there anymore.
I don't think there's any possibility that can happen right now.
No, I don't think so either. I think there's a. I mean, look again. If they don't devour each other in conference play,
maybe a better question is this: I think the Pac-12 gets a team there. I think
the Pac-12 is going to get a team there this year. I really do.
It's a question whether there's 2. Maybe the better question to ask is the SEC itself more likely to have 2 or 0? I think it's more likely to get 0 because there's every chance there could be nobody from the SEC, which is nobody would have thought about that before the year was started.
I mean, you think about it. Maybe they don't get anybody there. Again, if Georgia runs the table, they're in. So it doesn't. That's a moot point.
But if they lose to a 2 or 3 loss team in the SEC championship, I think, and there's an undefeated Pac. Well, there probably won't be an undefeated Pac-12.
No.
But we get a Pac-12 team. There could have an undefeated Florida State or even Duke, God forbid, in the ACC.
I mean, imagine if Duke runs the table. And look, the 2 best conferences right now are the Pac-12 and the ACC. If you think about it,
Duke
top to bottom.
I agree. So then, and you get maybe an undefeated Big 12 champion. There's a chance the SEC stays home for the playoff.
It could. I mean, like for me, Bama in trouble this weekend. Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss has every chance to beat Bama in Tuscaloosa this weekend. And then you can kiss the
great.
Kiss the playoff, the SEC title, everything goodbye. Georgia may not even be the best team in the SEC right now. It might be LSU who has 1 loss.
Yeah, if they run the table and win the SEC, then the Florida State loss is not even a factor.
And the Utah win over Florida, the way Florida's been playing, looks a lot better.
Let's go through these ranked games.
Yeah, let's do it.
We got really good games this week.
Oh, about time, man.
This has been the best. This is the best college football week I can remember, and I can't remember the last time.
This is a great.
First, the first game I'll come up with only because it's first on my list here for whatever reason. 7:30, I should say, Saturday night. Ohio State travels to South Bend. South Bend trying everything they can to keep red jerseys out of that stadium.
Yeah, Ohio State's going to be traveling.
This is going to be a great game. Ohio State, a 3-point favorite on the road. I love Notre Dame here in this spot. Look,
this is a big test for Notre Dame. Big step up. Big step up for Notre Dame because they haven't seen a defense like this. They haven't seen an offense like this. I think the fact that Kyle McCord's at quarterback now has got that offense going. They finally look like the Ohio State everybody expected them to be. I think week 1, we all kind of expect them to struggle in Indiana. Kyle McCord's got that thing going. They have the best wide receiver in the nation in Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Ohio State wins the game, but I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. Again, can Notre Dame's defense keep them in the game like it did last year? They have an X factor in quarterback now, but again, Ohio State's defense has been really good.
Ohio State defense played better, and McCord's gotten better every week at quarterback as well to go along with those great wide receivers. So this will be a great game. And by the way,
it's the game of the week, really. It's the game of the week.
This is a huge game for both these teams.
It's huge playoff implications, more so for Notre Dame, because if Notre Dame doesn't win, they're not getting in the playoff.
Yeah.
If Ohio State loses, they still have a chance to get in the playoff because of the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, they win the Big 12, they're in for sure.
Yeah. That's
my path for them. I have them in the Final Four, but I have them losing this game. Again, that's not 2 ranked teams, and I'm going to include it just because it's a huge game, again, with probable playoff implications. Florida State travels to Clemson.
Oh, what a game. I mean, that's on my Super 7 this week. I mean, I'm Phil Press. That's my Super 7. I mean, look, this is going to determine who wins the ACC playoff. Is it still Clemson's ACC? Is this Florida State's ACC? Look, if it's the Florida State that showed up against LSU, Clemson's got no shot to win this game. If it's the Florida State we saw last week, well, Clemson's getting a little bit better since that Duke game.
See, I'm
it's Dabo.
I'm not putting a lot of stock in that game last week. It's a classic look-ahead game, and I just think they were looking at.
Well, all the top teams struggled last week too. So
yeah. So I don't put too much. I just think Clemson, and I'm not sure. What the hell's his name? Klubnik. I can never say his damn name. I just don't think he's the real deal. I just don't think he's the next great.
I think Florida State goes into Death Valley and wins.
I'm with you. Florida State all the way. Next game we have. Oh, everybody loves this matchup.
This is going to, yep.
3-0. They haven't really beat anybody. They did struggle against Colorado State as a big favorite last week. Goes in to play a real football team in Oregon. I love Coach Sanders, by the way.
I love Coach Sanders. Class act. Great coach.
This is not an indictment of Deion Sanders, but they're going to go in, and they're going to get beat handily by Oregon on Saturday.
Is it more than 21 points?
I think there's a very good chance Oregon covers this game.
Look, this is a step up for Colorado. Colorado's defense is very poor. Travis Hunter is going to hurt them. Shiloh Sanders had a great game against Colorado State, but that game, embarrassing at the beginning, a lot of penalties. One team was ready to play. The other team was ready to just have celebrities there, and then they got going. They could have easily lost that game, and this wouldn't have mattered because then they would have been 2-1. Oregon and Bo Nix have had stat games, but they look really, really good. And Shedeur Sanders is going to be under pressure. Their offensive line is going to see big defensive ends. Same the other way. They're going to see a bigger offensive line, and you better get the ball out quick or you're going to be on your back all day. This game, Colorado's going to Eugene. I'm sorry, Oregon's winning this game. And look, this is where everybody's like, okay, it's time. This is now where we're going to see what Colorado's really made of, because you have Oregon and USC back to back, and you have this Pac-12 schedule starting.
Yeah, and by the way, when they're 3-2 at the end of September, it doesn't mean Deion's doing a bad job. He's doing the same good job he was doing when he was winning early.
Right, and by the way, shout out to Deion for sticking up for the kid from Colorado State.
Agreed. I just want to go back real quick because I was taking a shot at Klubnik here and John DeLon. Sorry, Don, I won't be able to go. John, I know you overslept. I won't be able to go long tonight because I got to jump on with Robert Butler. But we'll talk more Sunday about some of the way I was bashing your SEC tonight. So, next game, UCLA. Yep. Whoa, UCLA travels to Utah.
That's going to be a fun game. Fun Pac-12 game.
This game should be. Utah's got a much better defense, obviously, than UCLA. I don't know. I've heard that Cam Rising, but I've been hearing for the last couple weeks that Cam Rising will be playing this game. If Cam Rising plays this game, I like Utah. If he doesn't play, UCLA could slide in and upset this team.
UCLA could upset this team, but it's in Utah. I would give more of the upset if they were playing at UCLA. I like the way I like Utah at home, even if it's Nate Johnson, because they're starting to come together, and that defense is looking really good. They're the two-time defending Pac-12 champs for a reason. Their defense, they brought everybody back on both sides of the ball. They got off to a slow start last week, but in the second half they just took off. And if Cam Rising's there, look out, this team's going to explode. I think they're going to beat UCLA.
I guess we got a little delay here. Rick's got a question. What's the rest of Colorado's schedule? What do you see as their final record? I'll do this one more time. I'm pretty sure I still had them 6-6.
Yeah, I'll give them 7-5, 6-6. I think they may sneak another win in there somewhere.
I'll do it real quick here, Rick, because I want to get to the rest of these games. But I got them losing to Oregon and USC. So
that's 3-2. Me and you both.
They'll beat Arizona State. That's 4-2. They'll beat Stanford. That's 5-2. But then I got them losing to UCLA, Oregon State. That's 5-4. I got them losing to Washington State and Utah. So I guess it matters with Arizona. It's either 6 wins or 7 wins. If they beat Arizona, they get 7 wins.
Yeah, so 6 or 7 wins, and that's a really good job for a team that nobody expected them to do much of.
3.5 was the over-under on wins for this team this year.
I think they're going over that. So
yeah, that should be a given. Yes, that should be a given.
All right, let's go on to the rest of the schedule.
Yeah, let me get to the rest of the schedule. Pinstripe Bowl for Dion. That's classic.
Imagine.
Ole Miss at Alabama.
I said it before, man.
Jackson Dart playing some really good football, mistake-free almost. Alabama.
Very mobile too.
Yeah, I said it earlier, and Alabama with all kinds of problems at quarterback. I said it earlier. Ole Miss is either getting Alabama at the perfect time or the worst time. It all depends on how good a coach Nick Saban is right at this very moment. He's the greatest coach of all time. This is not his best team. He knows it. This is a perfect spot for Lane Kiffin to
look. If the kids aren't looking ahead and the kids aren't thinking what a great thing it's going to be to knock this team off, they come to play like they play, and the way they've been playing. If it's the Ole Miss team that I've seen the last couple of weeks that went into Tulane, all this stuff, they can win this game. Jackson Dart's playing great. I'm still not sold on Jalen Milroe. I know he's going to be the quarterback. Yes, Ridley Williams can run the ball, but that defense is not good. They don't have the recruits. They've lost a lot of recruiting. I know everybody's like, well, they still have a great class. Yeah, but their classes aren't as good as what they used to be. They're losing a lot of players to NIL, Georgia, all these other schools. It's not the same Alabama team. Look, Nick Saban's a great coach, but he even knows his team's not that good.
This is a good spot to ask this question. We were talking about it kind of when you came on. Arch Manning stuck right now, third string. I don't read a lot into that at Texas. A lot could happen. Arch Manning next year, starting at Texas, or is he somewhere else in the SEC? Alabama. Rick Sherlock wants to see him at Georgia. I still think he may find his way to Ole Miss. What do you think?
I could see him entering the transfer portal.
If Cam Ewers stays and has a big
If Cam Ewers stays, then I think he enters the transfer portal and he may end up in Alabama.
Yeah. Why not Ole Miss? Following his
I like Ole Miss.
It's a better. I said this, and I know I'm taking us off topic a little bit, but I said this during the recruitment. Everyone, you go to Texas, you go to Alabama. But what's a better story than if he went to Ole Miss and found a way to lead Ole Miss to a national championship, where his grandfather went to school and starred, where his uncle went to school and starred. Two of his uncles went to school and starred, counting Cooper. That'd be one of the best stories in college football.
I would love it. That'd be awesome.
So, what do we got here? John DeLon, our resident SEC elitist, is not overly impressed with Ole Miss because we know he doesn't like Lane that much. Well, he's not the big Lane Kiffin hater, actually, but there's some others that are worse. They did beat Tulane with a backup quarterback, but still they went in and won it against a good team on the road. Lot to be proven. I get that. This is a good spot to do it, though, and I think I like Ole Miss as well.
I think that spread is way too high.
Yeah, I do too. Next matchup of ranked teams, or two really good teams, by the way. Speaking of good teams in the Pac-12, sorry, John DeLon.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon State goes to Washington State.
Ooh, fun game.
Point favorite on the road. That's rough, man. I love Oregon State, but I like Washington State and the points here. I really do.
To Washington State at home, man.
If Ward doesn't turn the ball over, Washington State wins this game.
Absolutely. DJ's been playing great in Oregon State, too. This is a sneaky good game. But something about teams going to Washington State's a tough barn to play in. And these are the two survivalists next year. These are the guys that want the Pac-12 to stay together.
Absolutely. So your pick is?
I'll take Washington State at home.
State. Nice.
Something about them at home. There's so there. It's tough. It's a tough place to play.
Gotcha. We're running out of time here. I think it's our last ranked matchup. If I miss one, you let me know. Iowa at Penn State. Iowa breaks out with 41 points last week. Don't forget, Kirk Friends' who I can never remember his first name, the offensive coordinator, has a contract that says he needs to average 25 points a game, which he scored under the first two games. So now his average is up to over 25, and win 7 games or he's going to get fired. I think this is a horrible spot for Iowa.
They ain't winning Happy Valley. No chance.
McNamara's the best quarterback Kirk Friends has had in a while, but you know what? This offense is still prehistoric in my mind. Penn State's going to kill them.
And Penn State's actually got a quarterback now. Yeah, they actually have a quarterback in LR. I mean, like Drew LR is awesome. You got Allen at the running back, Lambert Smith wide receiver. I mean, that defense is probably one of the best defenses James Franklin has. Yes, Ole Miss is going to beat Alabama. I can see it.
Anthony, welcome. Everybody's coming in late tonight, but that's okay. We're going to say just a couple more minutes. Mississippi, we both like to beat Alabama.
But sure. I think, look, I hate the fact that that's tied to his contract, and that's going to be the week-to-week thing with Iowa. But
Jad, we'll talk on Sunday.
But to me, I just like Penn State here. I think it's Happy Valley night game, whiteout conditions. Not a good spot for Iowa. Yeah, they hung 41 last week, but they go on the road. This be a different. I would be singing a different tune. I still think Penn State would win the game, but I sing a different tune if they had to go to Iowa.
Yeah, it might be a little different because it'd be like a 10-9 game, you know. So
right. Just real quick before we get out of here, sneaky good game on a schedule. Oklahoma, Cincinnati. That's a sneaky good game, and I also was looking at another game that actually Oklahoma
dark horse pick for the Final Four.
So a couple other Pac-12 games because people don't stay up Pac-12 after dark's actually really good. USC off a bye into Arizona State. Watch out, that game could be a little closer than the 34.5 point spread that is out there in Vegas. We just did. And I want to see what Michael Penix Jr.'s got to do against Cal, and see if he can keep the Heisman frontrunnership going.
I think Washington has yet another blowout victory at home.
I think so. I think he's gonna. Everybody's like, "Yo, what was this Michael Penix in Indiana?" I was like, "Well, he's got weapons now.
He's got huge weapons, and yeah, Indiana was not a good fit for him." Tom Allen's probably going to lose his job this year at Indiana. He's not a bad football coach. He had a good year during the COVID season, and that was nice while it lasted. Indiana's just not the football school that Washington is.
Look, these are the teams to me in the Pac-12. It's going to come down to Utah. It's going to come down to Oregon, Washington, USC for the Pac-12 championship.
Absolutely. Jim, listen, I hate to rush out. We're going to have to run. Jim, thanks for coming in. John DeLon, sorry you got in late. All those anti-Pac-12 comments we'll get to, I swear to you, on Sunday. We'll talk more about it on the Sunday Stream of Consciousness. Jim, thanks for coming in. Catch Jim on Let's Talk Sports. Catch his articles on fullpresshockey.com. Great stuff. And we have Jim on lots during the season, so you'll see a lot of him going forward. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.